What's up, guys? Welcome into the Tuesday, May 21st edition of Fourth and Wrong Daily. You can hear me? Electric start. We're joined by a very special guest. There's a lot to talk about today. I appreciate you guys in the chat. The usual suspects: Willie Gray, Evan Grimes, Corbin Maddox. How are you? Do us a favor, like and subscribe, not necessarily in that order, to the YouTube channel. Would help us out a ton. Appreciate you guys doing that all last week and sharing with your friends, all that good stuff. How can you not hear me? Can everyone else hear me? Give me a thumbs up on that. Graham cannot, though. Graham, I don't know what to tell you on that. I think you just did hear me. What about now, Graham? Okay. All right. Well, Evan, I appreciate that. Graham, why don't you sign out and sign back in and see if that works? Or maybe throw the headphones in rice. I don't know. But I appreciate you guys joining us. Welcome in. So I was going to say, a lot to talk about today. Not necessarily something I saw coming. I don't think any of us really did. But a lot to discuss. That's arguably worse. A lot to discuss today. And a lot of it is going to be about Georgia. We had planned on doing a show with Graham that was going to be Georgia focused. And then the news this morning from our good buddy John Talty that Jaden Rashada, former Florida commit, former four-star quarterback, and recruit. If you remember his recruitment, it was kind of crazy because he had a ridiculous number thrown out to him while I was at Florida. I remember doing a video for this for SDS last year. And it was about the fact that Florida not only offered him a ton of money, but they offered him $13.85 million. If that sounds like a lot to you, it's because it is. It's more than some first rounders make, I'm pretty sure. And, I think when it happened, it seemed like it was one of those things where it's like, well, this is all very new. Like, maybe this is normal. Like, maybe this is the new thing. Like, I'm not sure what the timeline was, but I know Nico from Tennessee, he got $8 million. But at the same time, it seemed like most of those were possibly rumors as well. And 13.85 seemed very big. Again, not for the number one recruit in the country, not for a 5-star, not for the number one quarterback in the country. A 4-star, top 50, number 6 overall quarterback in the country got more than any other recruit in the history of recruiting, including Cam Newton. Graham, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Good to be here. Sorry about the technical difficulty there.
Yeah, not as sorry as you're going to be, but that's fine. I appreciate the effort. Listen, you are an expert on all things Georgia. That's why I wanted to have you on here. And this news today, I'm fascinated with the entire story because the backstory of it and the stuff that was happening behind the scenes. I know that you know some of those things that were happening that not a lot of people do. So hopefully you can shine some light on that. But then also, we've never seen this before. We've seen a lot of things. We've seen empty promises from coaches. We've never seen this before.
Yeah, I think regardless of how you feel about Rashada and some of the things that went down in his recruitment between Miami and Florida, if you are somebody who wants NIL to get fixed, if you want to see us get to a resolution where some of this player movement slows down, I think today is a good thing because I think this is a step in the process. Yeah, I am not, when it comes to is he going to win the case or any of that? I'm not a lawyer. I don't know. But I've seen some people that have been like, well, this is a distraction for Georgia or one thing or another, kind of being critical of the situation. If it was me or if it was my kid and we're talking about this amount of money, I'm pretty sure that, I'd be out seeking recourse as well. So I don't like some of the, criticism necessarily of how this is going down. I'm not surprised this happened. And when he committed to Georgia, I texted somebody that day and was like, it's going to be really interesting when, Georgia has a player on their roster who's involved in some sort of legal situation with the University of Florida. I didn't think or know that he was going to sue Billy Napier specifically, but I'm not surprised this came down the pipe.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where it's interesting because for a number of reasons, right? But it's also interesting because we've never everything is so new and everything's in its infancy. And the first thing I thought of outside of like, picking my job off the floor was Kirby, Lane, Saban. They all said that like there needs to be some regulations. Like this is going to be an issue. And the casual fan sat back and said, like, you know what? Like they're just complaining about it. They don't want to see kids get paid. And when you don't have some sort of like governing body or like just a mature adult in the room to say, hey, don't do that, which the NCAA could never do. Right. This is one of the things that happens. And I thought one of the things that was interesting too is if he's suing Florida, because it sounds like he was promised not only the 13.85, but he was promised $1 million on signing day alone, right? And this is a kid that he's from California. He got recruited by Miami and promised $9.5 million from them. And then Florida came in, and I don't know if this was just like a dick measuring contest, and they were trying to like beat like one of their almost rivals. So they throw out 13.85. But when that happens, then you start scrambling, and it's like that is a lot of teams, even the SEC, like their entire NIL. And go ahead.
No, yeah, you're right. It is. And I mean, I think that's the interesting piece of this is how much was this, what time span was this contract supposed to be over? Like right. If Rusty Hardin took this case, who, if you're not familiar with him and you're watching, like go Google him. He's represented Roger Clemens in his perjury case against Congress and won. Like he's represented a lot of like really famous athletes, Scottie Pippen, Rudy Tomjanovich, like all these people. I don't think he takes this case if there's not some piece of paper or something that leads him to believe that he can win it. Now, maybe it's just winning it in the court of public opinion, but I will say that I do know for a fact, like this situation, this scenario is not specific just to Rashada, and it's not specific just to Florida. So what I'm very interested is like, is this the dam breaking and we're about to go through a year or two period of like a bunch of current college players suing schools and coaches?
I mean, yeah, I haven't even thought about that part because like when you say that, like it opens the door. Like, what is this? What has a lot of this been? It's been not necessarily a money grab, but kids trying to profit off of their own name, image, and likeness and make as much money as possible, which is like, again, nobody here has a problem with. Mm-hmm. But as soon as you crack open that door, it wasn't going to be long until somebody fucking just Van Damme kicked it in and was like, you know what? Like, here's all of the things that we want instead. And like, I think you are going to see an uptick in this. You said this earlier. This is not the only incident of it at all, right? Like teams getting like empty promises of I didn't realize that it was going to be just on signing or especially on signing day as well, which makes sense. I think the cause and effect of it, like one cause and effect of it is if you have Billy Napier reportedly called and said if Rashada signed on signing day, he was going to get $1 million as a signing bonus right there. And we in the past we've seen playing time like thrown out there more than anything, right?
Right.
And obviously he commits, he never gets the $1 million. I don't think he ever set foot on campus at Florida, ends up signing at Arizona State. But like if you throw out that number and then you have a kid say, you know what, you promised me this, I'm going to sue you, and it's not in a contract, it almost feels like a back and forth power play of like, all right, well, now we're going to start having contracts. And if we're going to have contracts, now we're getting closer and closer to more NFL type stuff.
Yeah, well, and I think this, situations like this have led to some guys getting contracts. Jeremiah Smith, who signed with Ohio State on early signing day back in December, was the number one overall player in the country according to some services, who was a wide receiver, really talented kid. You've probably seen clips of him on Twitter balling out in spring practice and whatnot. But his letter of intent was kind of delayed in terms of being delivered to Ohio State, and it started going on into the evening hours, and a lot of speculation started happening of like, is he going to go to Miami? What's going on here? And the reality was that he had a NIL agent who, is an attorney going over the paperwork with Ohio State and making sure everything was square before he sent that letter in and kind of closed the door on his outs. So I think players are getting smarter, especially top players. But yeah, I'm curious to know what the background is on some of this with Rashada, like besides just, Billy Napier called and said, we're going to offer you $1 million. Like I would think with the amount of money we're talking about, there had to have been some paperwork at some point in time, but it is really interesting just because at the time that this was all going on, we were in a situation where NCAA rules were basically such that, it was supposed to be just the collective dealing with just the kid and not the coaches. And I have zero doubt that tons of coaches were talking, figures with different players, but to kind of get caught in that is a bad move by Napier, just because like you are in a spot now where look, things aren't going great for him in that tenure. And it just looks sloppy, really. Like if you're in a spot to say, hey, we're going to give you $1 million on signing day, blah, 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 and you didn't come through with that, I think everyone else that you're recruiting right now is going to start questioning the validity of your word, basically.
Yeah, I think the only, not the only maybe, but like the most positive optics you could have, and like the only positive PR you might be able to like get from this is one, like I hope this doesn't happen, but it's going to be like, especially if lawyers get involved, and you've obviously seen Law and Order before and movies like that and shows like that, like where they're going to try and to like make the other side look bad, and they're going to try to make this kid and his family look greedy, and that's because once like lawyers get involved, like, it becomes even dirtier than recruiting, which is difficult to do, but will absolutely happen. I think the one positive like piece of PR from this is, listen, man, a year after this happened, he still goes out and gets DJ Lagway, who through everything that happened in that class stayed committed, like, enrolled early, and by all means should get some playing time this year. And it almost seems like the bullet dodge from this, like for Miami, for one, is incredible, because Miami would have thrown out that money for sure. The other part of it is like, it was such a weird window of, is this going to be what the new reality is? Because we've seen in the NFL all the time, the fucking Falcons just did it with Kirk Cousins. Like, I mean, overpaying for quarterbacks is nothing new. The 13.85 is kind of crazy. You brought this up. Somebody said it was going to be a distraction for Georgia.
Yeah.
Zero part of me believes that, but like, what is the mood around Georgia, the program in general, about Rashada? And then also if there's anything about this specific thing, because everyone had to know, like Kirby signed off on it because of course he did. What's the mood about this issue or incident with Rashada, and then Rashada in general?
Well, there's two angles to this. First, with Rashada in general, I think like I see people saying it's a distraction, blah, blah, blah. Those were the same people who I think were also kind of like not believing that he was going to end up at Georgia in the first place when some of the buzz started with him being connected to UGA out of the transfer portal. So I understand where they're coming from, but it's like, he's a backup quarterback. Your starting quarterback is not going to miss practice to go sit in a deposition. Like I don't think there's a ton to worry about here. The reality is that the moment where it could become a distraction of any kind would be if Billy Napier survives this season and Jaden Rashada is the starting quarterback at Georgia in 2025. Then that gets interesting, right? Like, and I mean, for people like us, I think it's great drama. It's there's a lot of interesting content to be created. There's a lot of good angles there, but I think there's an interesting angle here with Kirby Smart, who built Georgia kind of in this sort of slow burn, even though they were, in the title game in 2017. Like there was this build up from a recruiting standpoint, right? Like I don't think you would argue that. And you sort of built this up and you start winning national titles. And that should be the moment where the recruiting goes to kind of galactic levels. They signed the number one class last year. I'm not saying things are going poorly, but if Georgia had signed all the kids that they were in on last year, like just from a perspective of NIL maybe didn't exist. Like the class that we're talking about would have been beyond that Texas A&M class that was the highest rated ever. Like it would have been insane. And I think there is part of Kirby that is rightfully pissed of like, I built this and now, I'm having to deal with some of this bullshit from the NIL standpoint and just some other tomfoolery that's going on with tampering. Like, I think some of these frustrations for him go all the way back to Justin Fields in terms of player movement and how other coaches are sort of scouting Georgia's roster. And you look at the past year or two, right? Like you had the Amarius Mims Florida State situation. You had, him also connected to Tennessee. Like Georgia has kind of been adjacent to some stories like this where it has become public that certain programs have maybe been engaged in improprietous activities around their recruiting. And I do wonder, what the sequence of events is here. Okay. Like I'm going to be honest. No one has come to me and said Kirby Smart, wanted this to happen or anything like that. And I don't think Kirby Smart could in good faith keep this from happening, even if he wanted to. So I'm not trying to say I know what his feelings are on the situation because I do not. But there is an interesting angle here in the timing of Rashada was at Arizona State for a year and he hops in the portal, signs with Georgia, and 25 days later, Rusty freaking Harden is filing a suit in federal court against Florida's head coach. Like, I think that Kirby is trying to preach a lot of the same things that Saban was around trying to rein this stuff in. And I think in some cases, like he's willing to sort of blow the whistle in certain situations that he feels like maybe have been wrong. Because I'll just say, like, this is not the only kid who, there have been players who would have signed with Georgia if not for last week of the recruiting cycle. A coach calls him up and says, we'll give you X amount if you sign on Thursday with us. And then that kid, never sees that money and his career maybe hasn't panned out to this point. So it's just an interesting angle to consider in my opinion.
No, I definitely get that. I mean, like one of my favorite, it wasn't at the time, but it has now become in hindsight, one of my favorite things that's happened when all this was the NIL stuff in the offseason, when coaches would talk about it, like multiple times Saban would say something. And the overwhelming reaction was that he is complaining about he doesn't want players getting paid. And I definitely think that like this is like a majority of what drove him out of the game, because it's like it's just so much to deal with, especially if you're fucking 72 or 73 years old. But like the thing that would crack me up is he would say it, and like a day later, Kirby would say the same thing. And you wouldn't hear much of anything, or Kiffin in the same way. But like, I think the thing with Kirby is it's got to be frustrating to him, because I think if there were no, like if we were playing by the old rules, especially with Saban being gone, that would be I don't know if it'd be a similar run, because that's a crazy run that Bama went on. But I think that it would be a clear, like head and shoulders above the rest of the country situation with Georgia and Kirby Smart. I think this, like, pissing him off in any way, whether it's dirty recruiting or negative recruiting or like the lying, all that kind of shit, like that is you're playing with fire. Like there's just no reason to do that, because he will beat your ass in the recruiting trail or on the field. It doesn't matter to him. Like,
or in a courtroom, maybe.
Yeah. That's also true. Let's see. We got a couple questions here in the chat. Let's start with this one from TriStar. He said, "Why haven't you been in my spaces recently, Chris in Georgia?" So I want to set one thing clear for sure. That's not me. That guy's a piece of shit. That guy's the worst. He's like one of the worst human beings. So that's not me at all. I'm just Chris, who used to live in Georgia and also not another piece of shit. Graham, we talked about your rankings last night. We might close with it, but I do want to keep this UGA specific. Couple of questions. One, when you look at big picture, right? We talk about the schedule. I want to take you through the schedule. I want you to give me an actual number, level of confidence that you have of Georgia winning those games, because it's going to be tough, I think, for Georgia or anybody now to go undefeated in this day and age. Right off the bat. So give me a between 0 to 100 level of confidence for each of these games. Clemson.
88.
Look, that's going to be the lowest one.
No, I don't think they can score enough points.
Kentucky.
96.
It's on the road, Graham. You don't get that. That's the thing.
That's why it's not 100.
Bama.
Come on. You said Bama?
Yeah.
I think that, if we're talking I'm treating this like percentages basically, since you gave me 0 to 100. I think probabilistically Georgia, let's say like 76, maybe. Like I don't know.
Trap, Graham. I'm not gonna get mad at you about this.
No, I mean, like, I do think that there's a lot that I don't know about what that team is going to look like under Caleb DeBoer offensively. Like, there's a scenario where he figures out some things to do with Jalen Milroe that Tommy Reese never did, right? Like that wouldn't shock me. So I think that one is the game on the schedule. Everyone's kind of pointing to Texas and Sark. I think Bama's probably the tougher test between the two, just because you still have a lot on the line of scrimmage at Bama that Sark maybe hasn't quite built up yet, and
also lost in the draft too. Between Auburn and Mississippi State, I'm assuming both hundreds.
Look, man, I mean, Freeze is a good enough. Mississippi State is definitely a 100.
Yeah.
Freeze is a good enough offensive mind to scheme some things up and create some level of doubt there, but unless some quarterback revelation, unless some kid they sign that's a freshman emerges and takes that spot from Peyton Thorne, it's hard to see any realistic scenario, barring something bizarre, where Auburn would win that game.
All I asked for was a fucking number, Graham. That's it.
I'm sorry.
Number
97. Go fuck
Texas.
yourself.
You kind of alluded to this one. It would be higher than the one at Bama. Texas.
80.
Okay. Florida.
100.
Ole Miss, a sneaky good game here.
Mm-hmm.
God, you guys are playing UMass. Dude, did UMass, who made their schedule? Because they play multiple SEC teams. That's going to be a bloodbath. Ole Miss, Tennessee.
Ole Miss, I'm going to say 90. I don't buy it.
And then Tennessee.
I'll say 80, or I'll say 90 for them as well.
What if it rains
in Tennessee? 99.9.
All right, here's my question for you after that. Like, I think a lot of people, to have Georgia going less than 11-1 feels crazy at this point, which has a lot of other program that Kirby's built. If there's a team outside of the SEC that could actually challenge Georgia, like I feel like Ohio State is up there. I just think that when you start breaking down like the actual coaching staff, and like the one thing that no one is bringing up about Georgia, the plethora of things that like are like in their favor this year, the continuity on the coaching staff. I know they lost a couple of guys that went on to become head coaches, but like you return your DC, you return your OC, like you return so much in that room, like in those meeting rooms. I feel like that's something that's like undervalued. Besides Ohio State, is there anybody you think that can compete with Georgia on a neutral field?
I think there's teams that you can't rule out entirely. Like I mean, like I just set up my spiel about Bama, right? Like there's 76%. Still, yeah. I mean, but that is within 1 in 4 is not a crazy number. Probability wise, things that have a 1 in 4 chance of happening happen all the time. I think Ohio State is the one that like everyone is pointing to, but I also am not sure. Look, let's put it this way. If you're looking for the characteristics of like who is going to really, really challenge Georgia, right? Like historically speaking, it is somebody that has a quarterback who can stretch the field vertically, and it has multiple wide receivers that can pull down like 50-50 balls in tight man coverage on the outside.
Yeah.
Like that is the thing that there's not really a defense for. So when I look at Ohio State, the wide receivers absolutely check the box. I don't know that I'm at that spot yet with any of those quarterbacks. Like Will Howard, they can do some cool things in the run game, but like I've not seen Will Howard tear anybody up in the vertical.
It's also not Ryan Day's. That's never been a part of his play calling ever.
Right. Correct. Yeah. And I mean, like, it's just hard for me to because I think this Georgia defense is going to be better than people really think. Like, I think that some things are going to click for them on the defensive line that didn't last year.
Yeah.
And it's just hard for me to feel like, man, they had CJ Stroud and all those dudes and still didn't get it done. It's just hard for me to say. Like, I think Georgia's corners are going to be as good a pair, or really as good at like 3 or 4 corners as Kirby Smart has ever had.
Really?
And so, yeah, I do believe that. Like, that rings true for me. So it just feels hard for me to feel like Will Howard is going to like solve that equation. So yeah, I mean, I also look at the whole spectrum though, and I don't know if I'm going to sit here in August and say I think Georgia goes 12-0. That there just feels like too much going on the road, and too many fluky things happen in this sport to just say like I think I'll pick them to go 11-1, even if I would go down the schedule and pick them to win all 12 games individually while breaking down those matchups. So I could see somebody like hitting, there's always surprise teams that pop up out of nowhere. If Texas can figure some things out defensively, like with what they have offensively, that does fit the profile more of what we're used to seeing.
Right.
Give Georgia problems. Bama, I think that they'll probably be better offensively, but I'm just not sure exactly about the.
They'll put up more yards, I would think. I mean, like they would have to.
What's the wide receiver like situation on the outside for them going to look like? Do you know?
So it's more of a family unit now. So they're all on the inside. So they're all really close and tight knit. Dude, I don't know. Like, here's the thing. 1,000%. Spring practice happened like right around as I got laid off. I enjoyed not being so locked into spring ball, like for my own mental health, because it's just so difficult to keep up with everything. I do think that the starting 3 receivers are going to be the kid from Washington that showed out in the spring game, Kendrick Law, I think, Kobe Prentice, and Kendrick Law, he had several big moments. He had also had several big plays that were called back for touchdowns, and then Ryan Williams coming in. So I think the
talent good. There, he's incredible. Yeah. And so I mean, like, I could see that working in a way where, look, let's like Milroe last year. What was he best at? In my opinion, it was throwing deep balls, right? Mm-hmm. So, I could see them like hitting some plays, and look, you saw what happened when Georgia had some turnovers in that SEC championship game in their own end. Like, it's just a thin margin of error. And talking about teams that are this talented on the lines of scrimmage. But yeah, I'm curious if like Oregon with Dylan Gabriel, does something click there maybe, or I don't know. I think that it'll be interesting to see if there's anybody that really like comes out of the new Big Ten besides Ohio State.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel that way. But yeah, I think Georgia should on paper win the whole thing. I'm also just 17 games potentially is a ton, and injury luck, I think, really derailed Georgia last year. If we're being fair and objective,
we're not going to do that. So
I know we're not, but still, like, I think, yes, if Georgia is not in a situation where they lose, 2 basically first round pass catchers again, then yeah, they might do it all and run the table. Like, I'll say this. I was down on the field before the spring game, and I was watching like the 9 300+ pound defensive linemen warm up, and
that all run a 4.8.
Yeah. And I mean, it did. Anytime you're at field level with Georgia's roster, it feels impressive. And I was down there last spring too, but this spring, like, I don't know why, I just got this like different kind of vibe. Looking at some of the dudes where I did have this like moment of they're going to win a national title this year. Like, that was kind of the like weird gut feeling that crept in, because how it is when you're covering a team, everything's so granular that spring practice, it's like, well, can they figure out this issue or that issue? And there was this moment where you saw all these guys and it just kind of like overrides all of those questions. And it's like, well, you throw this much talent at any problem, you're probably going to solve it.
And the thing, dude, again, the thing is that people don't understand is like, if you throw that much talent at anybody, it's gonna be difficult enough. You also still have the best coach in the country, and like I think it's gonna be really fun to watch Kirby over the next couple of years because like it's one of those things I think where you look at like how what's that saying, like we don't know we're in the good old days.
Yes, like, until they're gone. Yeah,
yeah, and so it's a great song with Macklemore and Kesha. You guys should check it out.
It's The Office.
But yes, it's also true. But they have like you look at that 2015 Bama team and coaching staff, and you're like, geez, how like there's 2016, 2018, there's still times I'm like, how the hell do they ever lose a game? But like, I just think that with where Kirby's at in his career, he's already got it figured out. He's got it figured out earlier than Saban did from like a year, like his tenure standpoint. He's still younger. And I think one of the things that Saban always preached was like, you never waste a loss. You never waste a loss and things that could be good for motivation. And since he has taken over that job in Athens, there's not a time that Bama has played Georgia and I've said, I want to play them again. I might have said it on Twitter when I was drunk or being arrogant, but like,
of course,
that's the thing about Georgia is like they just, the margin of error against Georgia is way smaller than the margin of error is for Georgia to run the table.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And there is a element, I've argued this mostly behind a paywall over the last couple of years, because I think if you say it out loud, then people don't, kind of miscontextualize it and think it's crazy. But like, there are clearly times to me where Kirby Smart and Georgia and their staff are using SEC games as practice.
Yep.
It's like, oh, well, we didn't do this well the last couple of weeks, so we're going to do this 10 times over today and make sure that it's, it's good and all of that. And there are times where like that Kent State game in 2022 was like, they are turning the sliders up to the ultimate degree of difficulty that they can for Stetson Bennett right now. And, it was interesting to watch. And I think that's
they ran
why
the same play like 3 times.
Yeah. And and Kirby says this all the time. Like, I remember him saying it last year after game 1, when they played, I think UT Martin, whoever it was, somebody was like, well, Kirby, do you feel like you guys are on track or whatever? And he was like, the team that is going to be standing at the end of the year when this is all over is the team that's going to get better, the best, between now and the end of the year.
Yeah.
And I think that he does a really good job of like managing that along the way. What's going to be interesting for Georgia this season is that, unlike last season, the schedule is hard enough on its own.
Right.
And so I am curious with some of these lesser opponents, like, do we see Georgia kind of like open it up a little bit and let Carson Beck go out and throw for 300 yards if he can in the first half and be up by 5 touchdowns at halftime so they can get these guys off the field and rest them because, we go to Bama in 2 weeks or we go to Ole Miss in a week. Like, I think that's very realistic. And if that happens, then I think we'll be talking about this kind of offensive renaissance or, whatever at Georgia. People will be praising the offense and the numbers when in reality, I'm not sure it'll be too much different than what they were doing before, but the throttle will just be kind of opened up in a new way.
I'm fascinated to see how basic he runs the defense in the first 3 games before that game against DeBoer in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, because DeBoer and I think Kirby respects DeBoer. I don't know why he wouldn't, obviously. But
that's good because you don't for sure. But I mean,
that's not true. I don't understand why people think that or why you think that. I do respect him, and I think that Kirby respects the hell out of Sark, and so he's not going to. He's not going to make the mistake of like giving him too much to game plan off of. There will be stuff in their playbook that they're drilling throughout fall camp that it's going to be earmarked for Tuscaloosa and Austin and Lane too. Like Kirby has done well against Lane thus far when they've seen each other in their careers, but that doesn't mean that, like, I think part of that is that Kirby respects him so much. Like, Georgia respected Ole Miss enough last year to really kind of show up and put their best foot forward in a way that they maybe don't always.
Dude, I told you it's going to be like a 20-minute thing. Do you have like 5 more?
Yeah, totally. I've got all the time you need.
I've enjoyed this a lot, man. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, man. So the last couple things I want to say about Georgia stuff in general, right? Like we talk a lot about the X's and O's. Nobody, like, there's very few people that get that from an X and O standpoint, like get the game as I feel like as well as you. And then doing the stuff we've done in the past with Josh and dog sets and all that kind of stuff. There's so, as much as I argue with Georgia fans, there's just so many of y'all that I really, really do love and like learn from and all that kind of stuff. And also, like, I love Athens. So
sure.
3 questions to close.
Okay.
One is going to be football related. Give me a breakout player that, like, I saw Players Lounge post 3 different graphics with like 5 players apiece. There's like 15 potential breakout players this year. Give me like one player that you think will have a breakout season, or might be like a household name by the end of the year. If you want to do offense and defense, that's fine. But just like, who's like standing out to you right now?
I think that, like, you know that Michael Williams is Michael Williams.
Yeah.
I think that someone's going to emerge on the other side of that defensive line to make them really like hellacious and obvious passing situations. It could be Jalen Walker, who we saw have some good moments in the SEC championship, but like only rushed the passer 120 snaps, I think, last year, like roughly.
Yeah.
It's either going to be him or Damon Wilson on defense, in my opinion. One of those guys is going to become a really good like pass rusher. And I think Georgia is evolving on the defensive line from a philosophical standpoint. And it started really in bowl practice last year. Like, Michael is a freak, and he could be a 12 sack guy, but the last 2 seasons they kind of played him as like more of a defensive end, like shaded inside and controlling, with gap responsibilities in the run game. And against Florida State, you saw them move him out to a stand-up pass rusher on 3rd downs, and the dude had 6 pressures and 2 sacks.
Right.
I know that offensive line was patchwork, but still, like, it was different looking. And I think that you're going to see him doing that, and you're going to see another former 5-star pass rusher doing that on the other side. And I think that Georgia, from an edge rush standpoint, will probably be as formidable as we have seen them under Kirby Smart.
Okay. Favorite bar and or restaurant in Athens?
Ooh. Oh my gosh, man.
I forgot you got KJ Bolden.
Yeah. KJ Bolden's possible, Evan. I that's a good one as well. I think that Dan Jackson may win that job just because he's so high floor, or at least start the season there at safety. But man, favorite. There's so many good ones in Athens that I don't want to offend anybody, but the Last Resort remains a classic favorite for nice sit down dinner.
Yeah. All right. Last but not least, I'm going to. There's a few people that know me better in like this world probably than you in general. Like those of you guys that don't know me and Graham, we sometimes bicker on Twitter and stuff like that. But
we're actually
Graham
friends.
Is so. One of my closest friends, and we got really close after 2022 with all this stuff. I was going through. It just became a really, really good person that I'll always be like grateful for on that. That being said, you know how emotional I can be. I don't. Well, fuck you for that response. I don't want to hear the Keely Ringo thing, but during this run, like you and I have shared, and you've told me like your like war stories of like the worst, losses and stuff like that. Like with Georgia, since you've been a fan.
Sure.
What has been your favorite moment? Not the Keely Ringo thing. I don't want to hear about that. And I'll let you think about it for a second. I'll give you mine. I think like the ones that stand out the most to me. But during this run with Kirby, like what's been your favorite moment? For me, the 2 that stand out are when they were playing Kentucky 2 years ago or 3 years ago now in 2021, ranked opponent, like 3:30 matchup. Like that was like a big deal. Chris Rodriguez is leading the SEC in rushing at the time. They come in. It's kind of close at first. But I remember at one point when it was like you guys pinned him deep on a punt inside the 10-yard line, stopped him on 3rd and 1. They had to punt, so you got the ball back inside, like on their side of the field. And in 2 straight drives, you went 5 plays for 75 yards after that. You guys scored there. But in the next 2 drives, you went 5 plays, 75 yards apiece. One drive, it was all runs. The other drive, it was all passes. And it was like Kirby just fucking, we can do anything. The other one, I talk about this a lot, man. And it's just such a cool moment. And I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, but I remember your tweet specifically, that game against Bama in the national championship game, when it was like, how the fuck are y'all here again? Like, how is this happening again? And I remember you like, maybe it's not a bad idea to bring in JT Daniels at this point because nothing was going on offense. I couldn't get anything going. And
Kirby going out there. I was sitting in the stands in the third quarter, like, oh, yeah, go ahead.
But Kirby, you're fine. But Kirby going in like to that situation, everyone in the country, like after what did just happen 2 games ago, everyone in the country, like kind of waiting for Georgia. And not only did they go out there with Stetson again, but they had 4 straight plays on the go-ahead scoring drive or touchdown drive, all passing plays. I thought that was even as a Bama fan, I thought that was one of the coolest moments I've seen from a coach, like one being like so present in the moment to not like freak out, then also like sticking with his guts, sticking with his guys. Like there's just few coaches I feel like that they can do stuff like that, like Kirby did. But what is your favorite moment?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm sure you experienced this with Bama. You know, I've been really fortunate to turn college football and covering it from a hobby into a full-time career. And like, I wake up every day and I'm extremely grateful for that. And it is, you know, that has happened because people like you know, retweeting my stuff or people in the chat, you know, like whoever it is, like every like little bit of engagement matters, as you know. And so like, I think that has changed, you know, just being so immersed in it has definitely like changed the emotional relationship with Georgia football, right? Because like, how could it not? At the same time, there are these moments that overwhelm and that are so like, you know, there's just so much charge to them that it's hard not to see them from that fan perspective. And there's a few that like do stick out to me. One of them is the kind of what you might call the first game of this run. Like if you remember the offseason leading up to the 2021 season, NIL became legal, right?
Yeah.
And Josh and I, Josh Hancher, Dog Stats and I, we were doing the Dog Sports Live show at the time. And we kind of talked and we were like, man, you know, wouldn't it be like kind of funny or cool if we, you know, gave some dude like on the team a few bucks to promote our shit and send a few tweets out. And like, we, you know, one day I'll tell you all the stories of like different people that we talked to. Like Josh really wanted to get Muschamps kid and like have like the walk-on lifestyle kind of thing. And, but we ended up working with Chris Smith, who, yeah. And like kind of at the time, I don't think anybody like really knew that he was going to end up being an All-American safety 2 years down the road and all that. But like he had stuck out to me and he was a guy that we had shouted out on the show a lot late in 2020 and end up working with him, you know, end up talking with him, getting to know him and his family a little bit, like really, really kind, genuine people. And I go to Charlotte for the 2021 season opener. And I go with my mom and my dad and meet a bunch of like very online Georgia fans that weekend. And that was really a fun experience. But as you know, like that game is tied late in the first half and he jumps a route and runs back the only touchdown of the game on a pick six. And like, it was really cool to have that kind of like moment of, hey, like I know how good of a guy this is. This is a really good kid. And to like see him have that moment on that kind of stage, biggest game of kind of the opening weekend was just like, there was some emotion there that was really, you know, kind of overwhelming in a way. That, and I would say the 2021 title honestly was so it was like there was so much happening, truthfully, that like it didn't. I couldn't really take it all in at
Yeah.
once. Honestly, my brain couldn't really process it in the moment. The 2022 college football playoff game against Ohio State. That game, I was in the end zone where AD Mitchell kind of caught that touchdown pass to take the lead late, but I will never forget like sitting down. I was there with my mom and dad came down to Atlanta for the game.
Yeah.
One of my really good friends, more of a cousin than a friend, childhood buddy. Like we sat with them, and my mom, like late third quarter, early fourth quarter, she's texting one of her cousins who's a huge Ohio State fan, lives in Youngstown, Ohio, and is like congratulating them and all of that. And it was kind of just this like, hey, it's been a good run. At least they won it last year.
Yeah.
And then there was this surprise of like all of a sudden Arian Smith's running at you, and this is a football game, right? But watching that whole swing of emotions to, the game is over to, Georgia's got a shot to Georgia's going to win to, oh God, now they're in field goal range. They're going to lose. Like that whole pendulum swing of that last half quarter was just so much fun to be part of. And when that kick sailed wide, like I remember, kind of just like looking up and taking in all the people. But the coolest part about all of it was like the Happy New Year sign starts flashing on the scoreboard. Right. And like I had no idea that it was midnight. So yeah, man, I mean, not sorry to get long-winded on it.
No, you're good.
That was cool to experience. My parents met at Georgia, and they were at the 1980 title game together, and like all of that. And, I remember my dad, like before the 21 title game against Bama, like I was in Indianapolis and we ran into somebody, and they were kind of talking about how like they weren't sure if they were going to come and spend the money. And he was like, well, shit, like last time we did this was 40 years ago.
Yeah.
If I wait another 40 years, like I'm not going to be here for it, So it was cool. It's been cool to like have the experience of covering some of these games, from the press box and, being kind of in that angle as a working journalist. And then also to have some of those moments where you're with people who, love Georgia and you're kind of around that and surrounded by that. It's been special all along the way. And I think that you said it really well, where like, I hope that Georgia fans really take time to enjoy what's happening, because like, yes, Georgia is the favorite for 2024, like we just talked about, but like they were the favorite last year too, it's never guaranteed. And especially with this expanded playoff, it's going to be really hard to win titles, and it's going to be easy for things to go wrong. So
I think it's such a good point. I think one of the things that I have, are you watching the SC baseball tournament?
Not at this very second, but
okay. Because the guy, whoever A&M's head coach is, he looks just like Brian Harsin. He looks like fat Brian Harsin. So I think that's one of the things that I honestly didn't expect this out of Georgia fans. I didn't think you guys would appreciate the moment. And I'll tell you what, one of the things as a Bama fan, that I didn't enjoy I remember getting a text from Kristen last year during like October, and she was like, you really need to enjoy this season. Like really enjoy this season. And I was like, why are you saying that? And she was like, you just really need to enjoy the season. I was like, God dang it. And I just think, that's a run where you played like, it's a run where you played in 9 national championships in like 12 years and won 6 of them. And it was like so much fun. I think one of the things that's really been fun for me, even as somebody that does not cheer for Georgia, look, outside of just making so many good friends that are Georgia fans and like, being able to interact with them on the show, like you said, like being able to cover it, like the coolest thing, even from a non-Georgia fan to have watched, is I think people forget about how like that getting over that hump as a fan, it's so the release and like the feeling, I have goosebumps now thinking about it. Like there's just no better feeling about it. And I think for Georgia fans with like all of the heartache, so I saw this everywhere on Twitter after that 21 game, which was like, second 26 can't hurt me anymore. 2012 SEC championship game, like
Even,
none of those things. Because there's really not a team that came closer than Georgia that many times. And like, I think it's just been so fun and cool to watch like this whole thing blossom like in its infancy like stages of what has become the best program in the country. So it's been really cool to see.
To echo the last thing I'll say on this, you know, I keep bringing up my dad just because like my dad
it's uncomfortable for me.
Well, it's a lens for me too, because like he has historical perspective of somebody that's followed the program for 50 years. And he also like remains a fan, you know,
right.
Like he's not, you know, his relationship with it hasn't changed in the way that mine has is by doing this for a living. And it has been nice because he sort of like grounds me in certain things. But I remember before the kickoff of the Georgia Clemson game in Charlotte to start that 2021 season, you know, you could kind of feel the energy. He looked at me and he was like, it's fun to play in big games that matter.
Yeah.
You know, and so many college football games, they're great and we watch them and we gamble on them and whatever, but like they don't really matter. And Georgia has gotten to play in so many games over the last 3 years that matter, you know, and they've won a lot more than they haven't. And I think like that is the beauty. And I think as a kid who kind of came of age in like the late Ray Goff, early Jim Donnan, and into the Richt eras, like, you know, I didn't see Georgia play a lot of games that matter until I was like almost in high school. And it's just been really cool to get to go to all these playoff games and SEC titles and all of that. And like, just kind of be in the middle of that, because like covering Georgia right now is in a lot of ways, like you kind of through that, you sort of run into covering the rest of college football because like they keep bumping up against all the other contenders. And this year is going to be, I think, like the most chock full schedule that they have had of games that matter. Start, you know, and like Clemson's kind of getting brushed aside as like this sort of, you know, undercard matchup, but like that's still a really good program. And like, that's still a great rivalry. It sucks that they're kicking it off at noon, but like that whole game, man, like if you took it and put it on the 2023 schedule, it would have been probably the biggest game on the schedule last year. Like
there's no chance. No chance.
What are you talking about?
The Ole Miss game would have been bigger.
Last year?
Yeah.
No, I'm talking about if you put Clemson as the opener of the season last year, like, and you kind of think about it like from that perspective, and you look down the rest of the 2023 slate, like at this time a year ago, like people would have been like, that's going to be the game that, you know, maybe determines a lot for the year. Like Georgia would have been a favorite and all of that. But I'm just saying, you know, in a normal year with a schedule that didn't include road trips to Austin, Tuscaloosa, and Oxford, I think that this Clemson game would be like hyped up, and the schedule's so jam-packed for Georgia this year that it's not really even something people are talking about much.
That's fair. I mean, they're mainly not talking about it because like there's at least a third of that roster that looks like me and you. So
yeah, dude, I love Dabo being like, we got 125 guys that went through spring practice. It's like, well, dude, how many of those guys are like walk-on ass Dabo stories that are, you know, that you're hoping emerge as like the 9th receiver in the rotation? Dude. Like, it's just, that's a whole other.
Yeah, no, we talked about this yesterday that like if Scotty Scheffler would have won the tournament this past weekend after getting arrested, it would have been probably the greatest white athlete achievement of all time, like white sports achievement of all time. So maybe we'll just do that on another episode. But listen, I've kept you for way too long, man.
No,
I really appreciate you coming on. Let everyone know where you can find your stuff, for one. We'll do it again soon. And I feel like there was something else I was going to tell you, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, first off, thank you for having me. Always happy to talk football with you. You and I talk football a lot, so it's fun to do it in a way where other people get to consume it too. But yeah, check me out at the Players Lounge.io. You can come to the Georgia site specifically, and I write a lot of articles there. If you come into the Dawgs Central forum, you'll find all of the intel and info and good stuff that would be maybe considered the insider material or whatnot. So would love to see you guys there. And yeah, please subscribe. And as Evan said, $9.99 a month. But if you go on Twitter and you send me a DM, I'm happy to send you a discount code so you can get in there for a couple months for free and check it out and make sure you like it before anyone charges you for anything.
Awesome, dude. I appreciate it. Make sure you guys, one, thank you for joining us. We appreciate it. If you were not watching live, we did the Monday live show with Tyler and me, our weekly Monday night show, obviously the night with Graham. Wednesday, tomorrow on the 22nd, we have Duke the Scoop from On 3. We'll be talking some stuff Auburn and a lot of recruiting. Yeah, he's awesome. Dude, always been a big fan of that dude. Super, super nice guy. I was almost offended watching people actually get mad at him for his takes. Like now that he's like with On 3 and getting more and more publicity, it all comes with the job. But anyway, make sure you guys stand for that. We have not figured out a guest for Thursday, but we will figure one out, or Evan will tell me what to do. And we will talk to y'all then. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.